A terror attack in Turkey tonight at an international airport. At least 10 are dead. 2 suspects blew themselves up. More than 60 others are injured. Passengers in the terminal were told to shelter from the attack. Also on News at 10 tonight, now it's for real. The Prime Minister in Brussels for the first time since the Brexit vote. It wasn't the result he wanted to come back with, so will his visit help?
I want that process to be as constructive as possible, and I hope the outcome can be as constructive as possible.
Nigel Farage is there too, the man they didn't expect to return victorious.
When I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
No resignation from Jeremy Corbyn despite a stinging vote of no confidence. We reveal Boris Johnson's Brexit plans if he becomes Prime Minister. And what's the excuse this time? England return after their European exit.
This is ITV News at 10 with Nina Hussain.
Good evening. In what seems like the latest in a series of attacks in Turkey, terrorists have tonight hit perhaps their most high-profile target to date, one of Istanbul's airports, and at the start of the holiday season. There was at least one explosion and maybe 2 details are still coming in. 2 terrorists are thought to have been involved. One opened fire with a Kalashnikov rifle. 10 people are reported dead, with another 60 injured. Istanbul's Ataturk Airport is the city's main one for international flights and a busy hub. It appears the terrorist detonated explosive just before the outdoor security check at the departures terminal. Some flights are being diverted tonight, but others in the air will apparently be allowed to land.
Inside the terminal, people realise something is wrong. Crouching down and taking cover. But it's at the terminal entrance where the carnage unfolded. 2 suicide bombers blowing themselves up as people queued to scan their bags and pass security. One attacker reportedly opening fire with a Kalashnikov rifle. Taxis were used to carry injured people away until ambulances arrived. 10 people have been killed, and it's thought at least 60 people are injured. But the true scale of this horror is still unclear. Ataturk Airport is the 3rd largest in Europe, a huge hub for 60 million passengers a year. But tourism in Istanbul has been badly hit. This, its 5th terrorist attack so far this year. And now it's worst. All passengers and bags pass through X-ray security checks before even entering the terminal here. But this extra layer of protection couldn't protect those at the terminal entrance. Recent bomb attacks in Turkey have been linked to Kurdish separatists or so-called Islamic State. It's unclear who is responsible tonight, but they've hit Turkey's main artery at the peak of its tourist season. Sally Lockwood, News at 10.
Our security editor, Rohit Khatru, is here. Terrible scenes once again in Europe. What are your thoughts on who might be behind this?
Well, it's midnight in Turkey now, and government officials are meeting, despite the late hour, to try and work out the answer to that question. Let's make no mistake about the scale of the ambition here. This is perhaps the biggest airport in the world to be struck by terrorism in recent years, and suspicion immediately will fall on one of 2 groups, the PKK, the Kurdish separatist group, but also on ISIS. And if they are behind this, this will be perhaps one of their most ambitious plots to date.
So much focus across Europe at the moment on the Brexit vote. What do you make of the timing of this attack?
Well, the timing is interesting. It comes at the end of the holy month of Ramadan. And IS has been calling on many of its supporters to use that period to launch attacks on so-called infidels across the Western world, including in Turkey, which has suffered so much as a result of terrorism. But what's also significant about this is that tomorrow is the second anniversary of the declaration of the so-called caliphate by IS. And this is a group that we know full well is very interested and is sometimes even driven by symbolism. World leaders everywhere are being briefed about the details. We understand that Barack Obama has been briefed by his security officials, and our suspicion is that that death toll that Sally reported on there is, if anything, likely to rise in the coming hours.
Yeah, clearly a developing story. Rohit Khatru, thank you. Things have certainly changed since David Cameron originally accepted the invitation to dinner in Brussels tonight. It's his first EU summit since the UK voted to leave, and it was probably his last supper at the top table of the European Union. He told them he wanted the outcome to be as positive for us as for them. They told him to get on with it to end the political and economic fallout. Enough, perhaps, to give Mr Cameron a case of indigestion.
He never much enjoyed these summits, though he'd fought a referendum campaign to be allowed to keep coming to them. But this is almost certainly the last time he'll have to pretend to be pleased to see the President of the Commission. After years of often lonely opposition, of fighting 1 against 27, he must face them one more time, promising to try to salvage something from the wreckage.
There is so much anger at the turmoil this is causing in Europe. What are you going to say to them in that?
Well, good afternoon. I'll be explaining that Britain will be leaving the European Union, but I want that process to be as constructive as possible, and I hope the outcome can be as constructive as possible. But I very much hope we'll seek the closest possible relationship in terms of trade and cooperation and security, because that is good for us and that is good for them.
Next up, the ordeal of posing for a family photo just days after asking for a divorce. Smiles were kept firmly in place, protocol and formality maintained to the letter, but still awkward. Just across the street at the European Parliament, a very different scene was being played out as Nigel Farage arrived victorious at the doors of a body he's been hoping to abolish for 17 years. Not far behind him, Marine Le Pen of the French far right, who hopes to ride British coattails to power and a French referendum next year. She called it a dazzling lesson in democracy. It was a lesson lost on most members of this parliament. Farage had been met with a hug and even a kiss by his longtime nemesis, Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. Though when Farage sarcastically clapped his speech, it was clear there was not much affection in it.
That's the last time you are applauding here. You were fighting for the exit. The British people voted in favour of the exit. Why are you here?
Churchill's maxim was, in victory, magnanimity. You can judge for yourselves how Churchillian this was.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? Now I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives. I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union.
Let's just say that didn't go down well.
The absolute negative campaign. The posters of Mr. Farage showing refugees like in Nazi propaganda because he copied it at that moment.
If that united this parliament, then this brought them to their feet.
And the people of Scotland voted to remain within our family of nations. I demand that that status and that esprit européen be respected. But please remember this. Scotland did not let you down. Please, I beg you, chers collègues, do not let Scotland down now.
That got the best reception of the day. Farage's departure was almost a metaphor for Britain's current position in Europe as he tried to get out through the way in.
Are you also leaving Europe now, Mr. Farage?
I hope so, yeah. How do we get out? If we can escape, we will.
His policy in a nutshell.
James, back to David Cameron. He'll be flying home later tonight, excluded from the talks tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. And we don't know how that dinner went tonight. We are awaiting a press conference now that he can tell us more about it. But what we understand is that he was trying to be as constructive as possible, recognising, of course, that the next British government is going to have to negotiate and negotiate hard with those very people. He tried to give a view of why the referendum was lost. And, of course, first and foremost in that it'll have been the issue of immigration and freedom of movement. That'll be no surprise to them. But he also said that Britain's future economic interaction with the rest of the EU is going to be dependent on the levels in which they permit us to restrict freedom of movement. He's sort of making a direct correlation between those two. Now, the bad news for Britain there, of course, is that throughout all the renegotiation process that went on for the last 18 months or so, and since the referendum result was announced, they have given not 1 inch on this. They say the single market has 4 freedoms: goods, services, capital and movement of people, and you don't breach one of them without breaching all of them, and if you want to enjoy all the other 3, you have to accept the 4th. There will have been some sadness, I'm sure, around the table. I know he's personally popular here, but there's also some despair as well at the policy that he led his country down, which they all, of course, profoundly disagree with.
James Mates, thank you. Any conventional party leader who lost a vote of no confidence by 172 to 40 will be getting ready to clear his desk. But then Jeremy Corbyn isn't, well, you know the rest. Mr Corbyn says he's not going anywhere. To resign would betray his supporters, he said. But he does now look to have a main challenger. Angela Eagle, who's been his understudy at Prime Minister's Questions, wants the role on a permanent basis.
Good evening, goodbye. Thank you very much for coming.
Jeremy Corbyn knew, as we all knew, most of his MPs don't support him, but to have 3/4 of them say as much in a secret ballot this afternoon made, to put it mildly, for a tricky day. There were 2 more resignations from his front bench today. The first came from a man who shares Mr Corbyn's political views, but still wanted him replaced.
I consulted my party activists, my elected councillors, and by a majority of 10 to 1, they wanted me to support the no confidence motion today.
It was an attempt to show there was dissatisfaction across the party, but Mr Corbyn's closest ally claimed MPs were out of touch.
If there is to be a challenge to Jeremy Corbyn, the best form of consultation is a leadership election. If that comes off, our members will have to decide again whether they support Jeremy.
Overnight, Mr Corbyn had managed to fill some, although not all, of the vacant posts on his top team. He will be forgiven for not recognising most of the faces that now sit around the shadow cabinet table. And at first, Mr Corbyn spoke to his advisor Seamus Milne, indicating that he wasn't that keen to show them off either.
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea.
Within hours, though, Labour MPs were asked to support a motion of no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn. Of the 229 Labour members, 172 said they had no confidence. 40, including Mr Corbyn himself, voted otherwise.
I say to Jeremy today, please, for the sake of our party, leave now. You cannot steer a ship without a crew.
We don't want any prima donnas saying we're not getting involved, we're not going to support the party, because our job, we're not just members of the Labour Party, we're members of the loyal opposition, Queen's loyal opposition. We've got to act that way.
Angela Eagle is the most likely tonight to challenge Jeremy Corbyn. Labour MPs say they know only one person can do it, so they don't risk splitting the anti-Corbyn vote. Tom Watson, the current deputy leader, here sat next to Mr Corbyn in the Commons yesterday, has not yet ruled himself out. Most people expect Jeremy Corbyn to dig in. He believes his mandate comes from party members, not Labour MPs who work here. But I'm told there is a big union meeting in the morning. Only if they give Mr Corbyn their support can he hope to fight on as leader. If there is to be a leadership challenge, it is most likely to come tomorrow. Chris Ship, News at 10, Westminster.
So the challenge for the Labour leadership is taking place, and we'll soon know more about who wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party and, of course, Prime Minister. Nominations open tomorrow. All eyes will be on Boris Johnson and Theresa May, but two other cabinet ministers have already announced they have joined forces on what one called a blue-collar ticket.
The familiar face on the right is the one to beat in the contest that starts tomorrow to choose the new Tory party leader and Prime Minister.
You're going to announce you're standing today, Mr Johnson?
Just a few months ago, this man might have done it, but no longer.
The truth is the Conservative Party was divided on the referendum, and I don't think, therefore, someone who was so prominent in the campaign as I was, and really only David Cameron was more prominent than I was as a Conservative, I don't think anyone, someone as prominent as I was, could realistically bring the party together. And so it's not me.
So who are the contenders? Well, the favourites are Johnson and the Home Secretary Theresa May, while the long odds bets are the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt, Stephen Crabb of Work and Pensions, leading Leave campaigner Liam Fox, the Education Secretary Nicky Morgan and the Energy Minister Andrea Leadsom. Strikingly, the Health Secretary who brought us this thinks he can bring peace and love over Europe to party and country.
The single market is incredibly important. Jobs, prosperity matter, but also we have to listen to people's concerns on migration. And I'm arguing today that there is a way that we could get a deal on this, because this isn't just a problem for Britain. It's a problem for the electorate in Germany, France, Denmark, Holland. They're all worried about the impact of migration.
Now, this senior Tory, the Business Secretary, isn't in the contest, but
I will confirm I am supporting Stephen Crabb, the Work and Pensions Secretary.
So if the big challenge for all the contenders is how to give our companies the best access to the European market while honouring Leave promises to control migration, another is how to keep Scotland in the UK when its government is furious about Brexit.
The motion we shall debate shortly invites the Parliament to give me and my government a mandate to continue this work and to explore every option for retaining Scotland's relationship with the European Union.
Tonight in Westminster, proof that not everyone likes how we voted. This is the Small Business Minister.
My mother is 84 and she wept on Friday. Just like my 24 and 25-year-old daughters shed tears because we made a terrible mistake on Friday.
A challenge to the new Prime Minister, probably Johnson or May, to fill in the blanks about what out of EU Britain will really look like.
Robert is here, and we're also joined by our national editor, Allegra Stratton. We saw there an emotional Anna Soubry. We haven't heard much from Boris Johnson once again, but you have been hearing some of his plans for Brexit if he gets voted to be the leader and the Prime Minister.
Yeah, a big if. So on Thursday we expect him to announce, and today he's got the support of Environment Secretary Liz Truss. They've been trying to canvass the support of female cabinet ministers. They think that's very important. Anyway, they've got one big one today. But you're right, what is the Boris Brexit plan? So I've been trying to piece together bits of the jigsaw. I think the first you can see on a graphic we're bringing up for you now is that they want access to the single market rather than membership of. So I think at the very least that is this idea of World Trade Organization tariffs. They're about 3% on goods coming into the EU and going out. That's if they don't get any special deal. This is all very, very early days, but I'm just talking about their pie-in-the-sky plans. They might hope, we think, and we'll hear about this on Thursday, I can't tell you any more than this, but they might hope to cut some kind of better deal than those 3% WTO tariffs. Then the second one is an end to the free movement of people. That is just non-negotiable with the kind of mandate he's got from the referendum. But then within that, I'm hearing that there might be some kind of acceptance that people who have offers of jobs in this country might be allowed to come. So if you're a Dutch doctor or an Italian nurse and there's a clear offer of work, you get to come. But again, this is all to be negotiated. And then the third that you can see, well, you actually don't see this coming up, but I'll just quickly say that one of the key things for them is an end to the supremacy supremacy of EU law. What you've just about to see coming up is this idea that they think it probably does need to be cross-party talks, and people have said to me this evening it's probably got to be people like Alan Johnson who are involved in trying to figure out where to go next.
Robert, we're still hearing talk while discussing possible plans for possible Brexit of second referendums, of nobody firing the button on Article 50. Is this conspiracy? Is this Remainers clutching at straws? Or is there still a chance that we won't actually leave the EU?
Well, I think at this stage it is wishful thinking. You can actually see from that little clip we had of Anna Soubry, the small business minister, breaking down in tears, that there are lots of people who passionately campaign for Remain who are deeply upset and are very much hoping that we can revisit it. But, the vote was the vote. Now, there would, I think, be a test of public opinion again, either in an early general election or a second referendum, if what the new Prime Minister ultimately negotiates with the European Union runs counter to what people who voted for Leave felt they voted for, which is why I think Boris's people are telling Allegra that, for example, there will be some kind of increased clampdown on immigration. I should point out, though, many people would think that actually coming to the UK if you've been offered a job is precisely actually what many people who voted for Leave would object to, because they feel those jobs should go to people who already live here. So I think we've got to look at the small print of what Boris says on Thursday to be clear that he's offering something that is consistent with the mandate that the electorate have given him. But very briefly, Gordon Brown is making a very interesting speech tomorrow, because he thinks that we could join something called the European Economic Area, which is what Norway's a member of, and be able to put in place safeguard measures which would allow Boris Johnson to put in place restrictions on immigration when it gets above a certain level. So there's a lot to play for here.
Briefly, clearly what is apparent in this time of uncertainty, division everywhere you look. Are we going to have to just get used to this?
Well, let's just look at the nature of the division. So we've got European governments very angry with Great Britain. We've got the Scottish government very angry with the government in Westminster. We've got Jeremy Corbyn at odds with Labour MPs who are at odds with Labour members. We have, Boris Johnson and Theresa May conducting a really angry campaign against each other. And we've got racists coming out of the cupboard at the moment. It is a pretty horrible state of affairs, and a lot of it, let's be clear, is not due to the European Union. It's due to the fact that millions of people feel they have been let down by the establishment. And right now, the establishment does not have the answers.
Robert, no ends in sight. Robert Allegra, thank you. What politicians, especially on the Remain side, are still trying to get their heads around is what drove so many people to vote Leave. Clearly, there wasn't just one or even a couple of reasons. It is a whole lot more complicated than that. To try to find out what they are, our social affairs editor, Penny Marshall, is reporting this week from places which voted to vote Leave. Tonight, it's Birmingham, which split nearly 50-50.
For everyone who voted Leave in Birmingham, there's pretty much someone else who voted Remain. This then a multicultural city, now split in new ways and unsettled. Everywhere there's difference of opinion.
I voted Leave.
Did you vote Leave or Remain?
Stay, love.
Stay?
Yeah.
So you're the opposite?
Right here.
Opposite.
And I'm staying right here because there's no way in Jamaica for me.
And immigration was a theme for most Leave voters on this Birmingham City bus, even the driver.
Why did you vote to leave?
Actually...
And do you think now it was the good vote, seeing what's happened?
I think because it's a small country, so too much population.
Immigrants coming into the country and that, hopefully there won't be as many because they just like seem to be all coming in and that.
But if we still have free trade, we'll still have free movement. That may not change.
Yeah, hopefully it will.
And for those Remain voters forced to travel in an uncertain direction, real concern.
I don't think it's good.
Are you worried?
Yes.
Better the devil you know than the one you don't, isn't it? We've been in 40 years.
I think now people are voting. Some people who voted out, they regret voting out because they don't know, they're hearing things afterwards. So it's kind of sad.
And some didn't hear anything in time.
No, I didn't vote, but I wish I did.
Why do you wish you did now?
Because I worry like what would happen in the future.
Which way would you have voted if you
I would have voted in, yeah.
The vote here was so close, practically 50-50. And with more than 40% of the population from black, Asian or ethnic minority backgrounds, it's surprising to see immigration raise its head. But what most Leave voters in this city do have in common, they're dependent on public services. And at Birmingham City University, there was concern that new fault lines are appearing.
Most people, certainly myself, it's not the country that I thought it was when I went into the polling booth.
A lot of promises were made to make the poorer people and the disenfranchised feel like they were part of something and they were going to be given an opportunity. And I think as soon as the vote has been made, it's been clear that that opportunity will not be there.
The joy of the winners in this multicultural city tonight feels tempered by the regrets of the losers. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Birmingham.
England's embarrassed footballers arrived home under a cloud this evening. The heavens had opened on them as they set off from France, where they were knocked out of the Euros last night. Their manager, or former manager, Roy Hodgson, seemed to be surprised to be asked back to another press conference to talk about what some pundits have called England's worst ever defeat.
Stony-faced, England's humiliated squad boarding the team bus for the last time to begin the journey home. The ignominy of defeat to the tournament's unfancied fairy tale team no doubt still eating away at them. A night that embarrassed English football and a night that forced the manager to quit a job he'd have lost anyway. Today, Roy Hodgson came, albeit reluctantly, to face his critics.
Yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I thought my statement last night was sufficient.
And if you were looking for a detailed explanation of what went so catastrophically wrong, you'd have been disappointed, although he wasn't about to pass the buck.
Do you believe that the players are as hurt as you are?
They can sometimes bounce back quicker than we can, but I would be very upset if people are suggesting that they didn't play well last night because they didn't care. I thought they didn't play well last night because sometimes in football that's what happens.
Before he left, Hodgson warned the suffering could be long-lasting.
One particularly bad game has caused a lot of damage to me personally, to the team, and even to the team going forward, because now they've got a major bridge to repair, which had we played better last night, maybe would not have needed repairing. So that's what I've got to say. Thank you very much for coming today. I've got nothing more to add. I leave you to your stories, and I thank you once again for the time that I've had with you. Thanks.
Thank you. He clearly found that a difficult and emotional final act. Hodgson was the best paid manager at the Championships with an FA salary of £3.5 million a year, and he managed the most valuable team, England's players, worth £590 million on the transfer market, according to one piece of research. Yet they won only one game here, and in Hodgson's spell in charge, won just 3 of 11 games at major tournaments. Despite the huge talent pool, despite the resources, the answer to one question still seems to elude the FA. What do they have to do to create an England team to be proud of?
When it comes down to the games that matters, we haven't delivered. And that's not just a recent thing, that's been a 50-year thing, and we've got to figure it out. So it is more than, I think, purely the skill and the tactics. That to my mind, there's clearly something around the psychological preparation and resilience, which is also important.
There was no fanfare welcome on England's return this evening, and the weather played its part to darken the mood further. No such gloom in the Welsh camp, though, relishing their rivals' demise last night as they contemplate something that was beyond England, a place in the quarter-finals. Steve Scott, News at 10, Chantilly.
A British winner was always on the cards in Andy Murray's first match at Wimbledon, and not just because his opponent was more than 200 places below him in the rankings. Murray was playing fellow Brit Liam Brodie. There was no upset. Murray duly won in 3 sets. Finally, as we approach the 1st of July, a date in our military history associated with both carnage and gallantry, the bravery of one particular soldier on the first day of the Battle of the Somme was remembered today by the Queen. Billy Quigg was a member of the 36th Ulster Division. On that first day of battle, a total of 9 Victoria Crosses were won. Many reasons why we should remember one couple from Northern Ireland make it their business to ensure we do.
There's 1,260 men in there and half of them are unidentified.
In the place where so many of his fellow countrymen died, Teddy Colligan has dedicated his life to keeping their memory alive.
Full military honours.
6 days a week he tells visitors the story of the 36th Ulster Division, the only British unit to reach its objectives in the Somme's northern sector on the first day.
The skyline is the German front line.
Initially, the Ulstermen did well because their commanding officer ignored orders. He used the British artillery barrage as cover for his men to go out into this field, into no man's land. Yes, some of them were killed by British shells, but it meant that when the barrage was over, the Ulstermen were right at the German trenches. There were 14 British divisions in action on the Somme on July the 1st. 9 Victoria Crosses were won that day, 4 of them by men from the Ulster Division.
Robert Quigg, the only surviving VC of the 4, won his VC rescuing 7 men out of the uncut German wire in front of their trenches.
Private Quigg, who survived the war, was from the County Antrim village of Bushmills, and at a ceremony there today, the Queen unveiled a statue of the brave VC recipient. Recognition 100 years in the making.
Great. I think.
Back at the Somme Memorial to the Ulster Division, Teddy conducts the tours while his wife Phoebe opens the tea room.
No, that's brilliant.
In part, she's here because her grandfather Charles served all over the Western Front, only to be killed just a fortnight before the war's end.
Do you think in some way you're doing your duty?
Yes, yes. Yes, and I think my grandfather would be proud that we are here. Yes.
For the last 15 years, Teddy and Phoebe have lived at the top of the tower, built to honour the men to whom the couple are devoted.
It's very emotional what happened here. You can't not be affected by it. I do, day in and day out, be affected by it, and have trouble talking to people sometimes, and you really do you feel it, you know, you feel the tears in your eyes very, very easily, but you can't not. If you're not affected by it, you shouldn't be here.
John Irvine, News at 10 on the Somme.
Julie's here tomorrow from me and everyone here tonight. Good night.
Tomorrow morning, as nominations open to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, who will be the next to reveal their hand to Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid?
Can we get your denial that you have any interest in being leader of the party out the way early?
No, because I'm not going to deny it. I am considering it.
Tomorrow morning from 6 on Good Morning Britain.